Hey there, and welcome to the Crunch Time Performance Show. I'm your host, Caden Thompson, and today I have another solo conversation for you guys. And before we get into it, I want to thank those of you who have tuned into the last couple episodes. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't already, be sure to follow the show to make sure you don't miss any of our weekly episodes that are coming out here on the show. But without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. In today's episode, I plan to run this episode a little bit longer than previous episodes. The main reason being I want to synthesize some key ideas about identity and behavior that I've been learning and working with over the last few weeks. So the inspiration for this episode specifically came from a short form video I made the other day. I recorded a video about how your identity influences your behavior. And after recording the video, the VOD was about 7 minutes long, and I needed to break it down into a short form video for Reels and YouTube Shorts and TikTok and all that. So I realized that the ideas that I had were much larger or much more comprehensive than would fit into that short form video. And so I decided I might as well make a podcast about it as well. And within this episode, I also want to encapsulate some other ideas that tie in really well with behavior and identity and having that sense of self. So I think this is going to be a fantastic episode, synthesizing some key ideas that I've taken away from the last couple of weeks of my learning and reading, specifically reading Atomic Habits. It's been a fantastic read. It's eluded me for too long. I think that I avoided reading it because there were so many people telling me to read it that my stubbornness was saying, no, I'll find another book that's got more value and different ideas and whatnot. But it's been sitting on the shelf for too long, and it's too good a book for me to avoid any longer. And I'm about maybe 4 or 5 chapters in now, and it's been a fantastic read so far. And so I've got some takeaways to synthesize for you, and among some other ideas that I've learned from other places and other sources. But yeah. So let's just jump straight into it. The first idea that I want to touch on from James Clear's Atomic Habits is the 3 stages of behavior change. So stage 1 is your outcome-based approach. This is where you begin with the end in mind, which I always say is important, but you basically create an idea of something you want to accomplish. Let's just assume that you might be overweight and your outcome is to lose weight. So the outcome-based approach would say, okay, I'm going to start working out and start eating better because I want to lose 30 pounds. And that's a great start, right? And you set the idea and set the intention. That's fantastic. But the willpower needed to still accomplish this task is high. You haven't broken down many barriers, and each day there is going to be a challenge and decisions you have to make that are going to require a lot of conscious effort to reach that goal. So stage 2 is directly changing the habits and implementing discipline within your goal. This would look like if you want to lose 30 pounds, all right, I'm going to eat at maybe 1900 calories. I'm going to consume X amount of protein per day, and I'm going to work out for 45 minutes a day, and I'm going to record 10,000 steps a day. And those are 4 habits that you can implement into your day that will get you closer to the outcome, the desired outcome of losing 30 pounds. With this, you've taken it a step further. You've now implemented some habits and implemented some discipline. So you have a strategy for getting there. But the willpower required to accomplish this feat is still high, right? It's still a conscious effort you have to make to stick to the disciplines and stick to the habits. And without a doubt, habits and disciplines committed over time, and the more consistent you are with them, the easier they will become and the less willpower required to do them. But there is a third stage that is even more effective at accomplishing the first 2, and that is changing the identity as a whole. What do I mean by that? Let's think about the person you'd become if you lost 30 pounds. you might consider yourself, for lack of a better word, a healthy person. That's not really the right exact way to think about it, but because you don't want to put that direct of a label on it, but let's just think about it very plainly in that sense, right? If your goal is to lose 30 pounds, you could consider yourself a healthy person, and that's the identity that you're willing to adopt based on this outcome, right? And so now that you've changed the identity, you can now ask yourself very simple questions. How do I create actions and habits, right? And create an outcome that aligns with that identity. And when you change the identity, it's much easier to act in accordance with your identity. Your behaviors will follow suit as the identity you've given yourself, right? And so in this way, we adopt an identity that may not be ours today, but we're becoming that identity and embodying that identity, and our actions are going to follow the identity that we give ourselves, right? And so I'll use an example about this. Let's think about an easy to understand example here. When you think about an extrovert or an introvert. And so as someone who has most of their life identified as an introvert, I can speak on this topic very clearly. I identified as an introvert because I felt that in social situations, I found it easier to not engage as directly, not be as outgoing and charismatic, and kind of stick to myself and the people I was really comfortable with. And I identified that way. I was comfortable that way, right? It kept me in a comfortable space where I didn't have to challenge myself and go out of my way to do anything that I didn't want to do in those social interactions. And that was my identity. So my behaviors fell in line with that identity of myself. Okay? Now, what is the benefit to me of being an introvert as opposed to being an extrovert? The way I see it, and maybe I see it wrong, but the way I see it, there may not be as many benefits as there are to negatives of being an introvert. Okay? I see having extroverted tendencies as being more beneficial. So I want to change my identity to become an extrovert, right? So an extrovert is someone who, in social situations, is more charismatic, more outgoing, more willing to engage, make friends, build relationships, and there's a lot of value in that. So when I get into a social situation, rather than falling back on the habits of the introverted identity that I previously had, I've now identified myself as an extrovert, and I would ask myself the question, what would an extrovert do in this situation, right? And that, even better than discipline, creates a conscious habit of acting as an extrovert, right? And it doesn't happen overnight as far as really embodying the identity of an extrovert, right? It takes time and it takes action and there's a process to it, right? But over time, if I take small actions that align with that identity, I become that identity, right? And in that way, I'm adopting an identity that at first may not have been mine, but now has become mine because I was willing to take the small action and work towards embodying that identity in every situation I got, right? And so then there's a saying that I love. It says, act as if, right? And there's multiple ways to go about it. Act as if it were impossible to fail, act as if it were true, fake it till you make it. A lot of times they mean a very similar thing because our actions influence our identity the same way that if we decide to identify ourselves in some way, our actions will fall in line. So if I take action towards becoming or embodying the identity of an extrovert, I've now worked myself one step closer to feeling confident in that extrovert identity. Does that make sense? And in this way, growth occurs in the constant cycle of action, failure, learning, growth, more action, right? Through this process, like I said, you can adopt an identity that wasn't originally yours, but fully become it through the growth of taking an action, right? Acting as if it were true, failing within that, right? Recognizing where you didn't quite make it, where it didn't quite work out, where maybe you wanted to act as an extrovert and you wanted to go out of your way to make that conversation, and it didn't go the way you planned. And it didn't, the relationship or the interaction didn't develop in a way that an extrovert might have done it, right? And then that experience allows you to learn, right? And you get to learn about that experience, and then that leads to growth. Okay, because if we allow ourselves to learn, right, that's eliminating the amount of times that same failure will occur again, right? That's growth. Okay, and then we take another step and we do more action, right, with that learning that's happened before. Okay, and we're less likely to fail again. Then as we begin to go through that process and that cycle of growth, failing less and less and less, we become more and more confident in the identity that we've adopted, and eventually, without us really realizing it consciously, that identity becomes reality and we embrace that identity fully. Now, I think this is a good segue into why I got into learning and coaching the mental game and how it impacted my identity and how I crafted my identity around learning and coaching the mental game. Right? A lot of my experiences led me here, but there's an even better question, and in this discussion, I'm gonna give you a few reflection questions where I would recommend that after each question you pause, you open up a journal, go through the question, write down some answers in the way that I kind of present it to you. And this will be a great opportunity for you to find that identity, right? Maybe find what's important to you. Step 1, find that identity. Step 2, and then step 3, identify the actions that are required to adopt that identity fully. And this might be a really interesting opportunity for you to become something or find a practical way to become something you didn't quite think you were ready to become. Let's jump straight into this. So again, this is coming from the framework of how I got into learning and coaching the mental game and how that's impacted my identity and what identity I chose because of the desire to do that. Okay. So the first reflection question, again, pause, take a second to answer, but what is important to you? And for me, I put in no particular order, I put relationships, helping others, personal growth, health, and achievement. Those are 5 things. I recommend doing a list between maybe like 3 and 6 things. We don't want to let the list get too long, because then it becomes really challenging to kind of hone in on a specific person or archetype that works for you, that you can see yourself becoming, that identity that you can embody. But again, now's a great time. Pause the video, go through that 3 to 6 bullet points. What's important to you? Now, hopefully you went through that question. Now, the reflection question 2 is, what is that desired identity? So who is the person that you wish to become? And this is about creating an identity that lines up with what is important to you. So when I talk about what's important for me, again, relationships, helping others, personal growth, health, and achievement in no particular order. And I would also add learning into that as well as I'm going through this and looking at the list. Learning and constant mental growth is important to me as well. So an identity that lines up with what is important to me is becoming a mental coach, someone who is helping others and building relationships around personal growth and learning. Using social media and creating content is another portion of that identity. Someone who is in great shape, because health is important to me. Fostering strong relationships within my coaching, but also within my personal life. So again, relationships was the first thing I wrote down about what is important to me. It's the first thing that came to mind. Constantly learning is part of my identity, because learning is important to me, and has the financial ability to take care of himself and his family. That is important to me. It kind of aligns with achievement. It also aligns with relationships and helping people. So what I wrote down was that is a person as a whole that I would be proud of if I looked down the telescope, or if I looked through, looked into the future and saw that person 5 years from now, 2 years from now, whatever. I would be extremely proud of becoming that person. So take a few minutes, whatever it is. Reflection question 2. What is your desired identity, and who is that person you wish to become? And again, link it to some of the things that you said in reflection question 1 are important to you. Now, reflection question 3, what are the habits and behaviors that correlate to my desired identity, right? And this is really simple. I made a bullet list of a few things that I'm going to read them out for you real quick that align with certain parts of my identity. So it's important you create a correlation between habits, specific habits, and the identity that you choose. So, for example, as it aligns to health and someone who is in great physical shape is part of my identity, a habit that I wrote down was, or a few habits, go to the gym 5 times a week, eat their body weight in protein, properly hydrate. Okay, those are 3 goals that align with a part of my identity that is important to me, that I can add as habits into my everyday life to get me closer to that identity, right? Because I'm acting in alignment with my identity, okay? And I'll read the rest out to you as well. So read a chapter of a book a day, create a post a day for content, upload a podcast episode every week. Hello there. Creates weekly coaching material, checks in on his relationships consistently throughout the week, calls parents 3 times a week, tracks spending, monthly audit on revenue generation for potential ways to increase revenue streams, right? A bunch of habits and behaviors that correlate with my desired identity, all in a list, right? And so now, from there, all I need to do is, 1, use the identity that I've previously created, right, as a roadmap, a North Star for where I want to go, what I want to become. And then 2, use these habits as a daily guide, a daily checklist of going, okay, can I check that box off? Did I go to the gym? Check. Did I eat my body weight in protein? Check. Did I properly hydrate? Check. Did I read a chapter of a book? Check, right? And I'm acting as if that identity was true, right? And then in that way, I'm creating the identity to be true, right? One of the ways that I hold myself accountable to this checklist, to this process, is habit share. I can't say it enough. I've worked with a few athletes already who have implemented habit share into their daily lives, and we rave about it as we go through our days, because it allows us the opportunity to not only track our habits, track what's important to us, right? I can create a little checklist for all these habits that I just listed out, that you just listed out. But I can also check in on my athletes' habits as well. So if my athlete and I have created become friends on habit share, I can check in on his progress and hold him accountable for what he needs to get done throughout the day. And he can do the same for me, right? And it creates a 2-way street of accountability that also pushes us even more, right, to hold ourselves to the standards that we're setting for ourselves. It's a fantastic addition to my life. It's pushed me to make consistent progress, because we're trying to make progress. We're not trying to be perfect. Progress over perfection wins every single day. So yes, absolutely. A huge win for me is implementing habit share. I use it with my athletes. I recommend that everyone should use it. I'm not associated with habit share, but it's a fantastic app. There will be a link to download in the description of the podcast. But that is a roadmap for embracing an identity that may not be yours and acting in accordance with that identity to then become it. Because we know, James Clear talks about it, consistent action compounded over time can take you to places you couldn't even imagine. So I really appreciate you tuning in to the show. If you enjoyed, follow the show, stay tuned. Check us check me out on socials at Caden Thompson _. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the good stuff. I post daily on Reels, but weekly and sometimes twice a week on the podcast. Yeah, and this is the first time that I've ever done a kind of a synthesizing multiple different ideas into one podcast. This took much more preparation for me and was a much bigger job for me mentally to work through. And I'm really happy I did. I think it came out really well, but I would love to hear your feedback. So leave your feedback on socials or wherever available. I really appreciate it. Yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed.